And it was the information, basically the blueprint for taking the internet to the entire world, what will become known as the World Wide Web. So now, 30 years later, we have half of the global population online. And it has significantly accelerated development of countries and transformed commerce, communication, just about everything in our lives. And we've seen the rise of internet giants, of course, Facebook, we've got Google. I'm able to talk to you and do this podcast because of Mr. Berners-Lee's idea here. And as I mentioned, the very idea of this World Wide Web connects with the concept of our interconnectedness on a much higher level. So there are some concerns, and Mr. Lee spoke pretty clearly about them in a recent article, I believe it was in Time magazine, on what he believed about the problems that the internet presents to us and how they can be overcome. So one of the interesting things that he brings up in this is the fact that really we think of the internet now as being sort of ubiquitous everywhere. But actually, there really are only 50% of the population is actually online. And that's really interesting because that's very significant in this idea that the advantage that our interconnectedness, our internet, gives to us is only being experienced by half of the world's population. So statistically, of the 7.3 billion people in the world, 44 billion that can't be quite correct there. About 4.4 billion, there we go, 4.4 billion don't have access to the internet. Now, besides the fact that half the world can't see cute cat videos, it also significantly impacts their development, their ability to participate in commerce, and many other things. You can imagine that most of these people that aren't connected are living in poorer countries and rural regions that lack modern infrastructure. Even in this country, there's a significant portion of the country that still cannot get regular internet service. That is something that is an issue that the government has been trying to address. Depending on who's in charge, they either make progress or progress doesn't quite go very far. But certainly in this country, there's a significant portion of people that don't have internet access. But worldwide, of course, developing nations tend to have the worst web connectivity. India has over 1 billion people who lack internet access, and that's followed closely by China with 730 million. So most people that don't have internet access, the number one country, Myanmar. 99.5% of the population does not have internet access. Ethiopia comes in second at 97%. Tanzania is 95%. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is 94%. Bangladesh, also in the 90s. Pakistan, 89%. India, 84% of the people do not have internet access. Thailand, 71%. Mexico, half the population, like us. Vietnam, China, same in the 50% range. Egypt, 50% range. Interestingly enough, Russia, Brazil, and then us are the ones that have the most internet access available. Only 38% of Russians do not have internet access. Only 35% of Brazilians don't. And 15% of Americans do not. But that 15%, as I say, is significant. And that means that, over half the world is being left out of some major gains in social, financial, business, education, and government improvements. This is going to eventually change as more people do connect to it. And that will bring some sweeping changes, I think. And there are some things that will need to be done. But let's find out what Mr. Lee thinks about that. And he's made it very clear that his invention has brought some things he didn't expect, such as state-sponsored hacking, that whole Russian deal with our election, online harassment, of course, the hate speech and misinformation. He calls it's digital adolescence, which I think is a very helpful way and hopeful way of looking at it, showing us that it's sort of going through some growing pains that we eventually will grow out of. So this threshold was crossed last year, in which half the world is online. But as I've said, that means that half the world is not. And he talked about this is an opportunity to reflect on how far we have yet to go, so that all the world is connected. He believes that accessibility issues will beset much of the world, but that it will continue to grow. He says, well, look at the 50% who are on the web, and it's not so pretty for them. They're all stepping back, suddenly horrified after the Trump and Brexit elections, realizing that this web thing that they thought was so cool has actually not necessarily been serving humanity very well. Well, my take on it is humanity is what humanity is. And the internet is serving humanity just as well as it possibly can. It can't create, moral behavior. It can't, change human nature. It can only provide ways and connections that might be sources of or resources of information to help that along. So now the hope of this World Wide Web Foundation that he has is to enlist governments, companies, and citizens to take a greater role in shaping the web for good under principles laid out in his contract for the web. That's very interesting. That the contract for the web has this rather broad ambition to make sure that everyone can connect to the internet. All governments should support that, keep it available, and respect privacy. Companies are to make the internet affordable, respect privacy, and develop technology that will put people and the public good first. Citizens are to create and cooperate and respect civil discourse, among other things. But it's it's incumbent upon us to do these things. No technology, whether it's the pencil or publishing or any technology that we've had that has revolutionized the world, it's used for whatever tools, whatever purposes are in humanity's playbook, if you will. Berners-Lee says the web is a mirror of humanity where you will see good and bad, of course. And the contract that he's proposing here recognizes that whether humanity in fact is constructive or not actually depends on the way you write the code of the social network. One issue he's insistent upon is net neutrality. He wants strong regulation on that. That anyone with an internet connection should have equal access to all things: video, music, email, photos, social networks, and so on. And he recognizes that the web's created many opportunities to make life easier, to give people who would normally have a voice a bigger voice. But he also recognizes that it's created opportunities for scammers. And some of those voices that might not have been heard may not be saying things that a lot of people want to hear. They may be saying things that are coming from a place of hatred or unkindness. But that's all part of the process, because it's all part of who we are. So how do we make sure that more people get connected? Well, one of the ways we're connected is through fiber optic cables. Explaining the concept of fiber optics is not something I'm going to be able to do in the last few minutes of the show, but it's a very important technology. If you have Verizon Fios delivering service to your internet or your television, that is fiber optics. And they are a key component to delivering internet service. So if you can expand that, which means having more of them across continents and beneath the oceans, then you can have a greater connectivity for everyone. So some countries are investing, public money into these fiber optic initiatives to help connect rural poor. India has one called the Digital India Initiative, and that is set to bring 600 million rural citizens across 250,000 Indian villages online by 2017, which is passed by 2 years. So hopefully that's happened. Wireless fiber is a new kind of connectivity that may offer fast connection speeds without having to use costly internet cables. Again, explaining that technology is not something I'm going to be able to do right now, but just know that that's something else that we can use to help connect. And then, of course, Wi-Fi delivery. There will be public Wi-Fi access that will no longer be limited to just coffee shops. It'll be